Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Clean Air Zone overview webinar. It's 1 minute past 12. I'm going to give it just a couple of minutes before we start, just in case we've got any few late attendees, as it were. Just to let you know that this is being recorded and we will circulate a link afterwards to anyone who's registered, so you can watch back or share with family and friends. Just before we start, for those of you who have joined, if you could just confirm in the Q&A box on the right hand side whether or not you can hear me okay. Just a simple yes would be great. I don't want to start going through the presentation if I'm just talking to myself. So if you could just confirm on the right hand side that yes, you can hear me, or like the comment, that would be great, and just then we know the technology at least is working. Not had any confirmation yet, so I'll just give it a couple of minutes. If someone can just confirm that the sound is okay, we can get started. If you can just like the comment, that will be plenty, just so I know you're hearing me okay. Fantastic, thank you to that person who's liked the comment, that's brilliant. We will get underway now with the presentation. So my name is Gemma Callow. I am the Communications Manager for the Clean Air Zone, leading on stakeholder engagement. I'm joined today by my colleague Peter Edwards, who's the Principal Clean Air Zone Officer. What we're going to do is we're going to give you a quick overview of the zone, when it launches, what you can expect, etc., and talk through some of the support that's available. If you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the Q&A on the right hand side. We will answer them at the end, but with that in mind, we'll get started. So the Clean Air Zone is being introduced because poor air quality has been declared a national health emergency. Every year between 26 and 36,000 people across the UK die from conditions which are exacerbated by air pollution. And of those, up to 900 of them every year are here in Birmingham. It has an extremely detrimental impact on health. It particularly affects the vulnerable and the most deprived, so the people who are elderly, those who live in areas that are closer to roads. And children are particularly affected because they are smaller, closer to the ground and closer to those exhaust fumes. They inhale 3 times as much air pollution than we do as adults, which impacts on their development and their growth. It's also linked to conditions such as heart disease, lung disease, asthma, etc. I won't go through all of them, you can see on screen, but we are mandated by government that we have to reduce our air pollution levels in the city to a safe and legal limit, and that is why the Clean Air Zone is being introduced.
Gemma, I'm not sure if it's just from my side, but I can't, the slides haven't gone full screen and aren't changing. I know you can't see once you start presenting, so from my perspective, now that's better. I just wanted to jump in. Hopefully everyone, if you can't see the slides or if you're having any technical difficulties, just put something in the Q&A, but I'll go back on mute now. I just wanted to point that out.
Thanks, Peter. So yes, so moving on from the original slide, apologies there that was minimised. In Birmingham, we undertook some research pre-COVID and we ascertained that 50% of all journeys into the city centre were made by private car. Of those journeys, 250,000 of them every single day were for less than 1 mile. That's about a 20-minute walk, 10-minute cycle ride. So what the Clean Air Zone is intending to do is firstly to deter the most high polluting vehicles from entering the city centre, but secondly, getting people to reconsider their journeys via car. Could you walk, cycle or take public transport and get more of those unnecessary journeys off the road and to improve congestion, improve air quality in the city centre. So as mentioned, we are mandated by government to introduce Clean Air Zone. They are being introduced to cities all across the UK. Bath was the first city outside of London to go live on Monday this week. We are second. We are launching on the 1st of June this year, but they will be introduced across the UK in cities such as Manchester, Liverpool, Portsmouth, Oxford, Bristol, etc. Each local authority is responsible for setting the boundary of the Clean Air Zone and the category. In Birmingham, we have chosen to implement a Category D Clean Air Zone, which means that we will be charging all high polluting vehicles, including private cars. So those vehicles that do not meet emission standards, be they buses, taxis, lorries, vans or cars, will be subject to charges when the zone goes live on the 1st of June this year. So the Clean Air Zone is everywhere that is blue on the screen. It's everywhere within the A4540 Middleway, but not the Middleway itself. So it's important to stress a Clean Air Zone is not the same as a congestion charge. A congestion charge will charge every single vehicle to pass through a specific area. The Clean Air Zone will only charge the most high polluting. We anticipate it's going to be about 1 in 4 vehicles that are charged. So come the 1st of June, all vehicles can drive around the A4540 Middleway, that road, no problem at all. The second you enter the blue area in a non-compliant vehicle, you will be subject to a daily charge. If your vehicle meets the emission standards, you do not need to take any action. So the charges for non-compliant vehicles will be £8 a day for cars, taxis and vans, and £50 a day for HGVs, coaches and buses. It's important to stress a day is midnight to midnight, not 24 hours from when you enter. But during that midnight to midnight time frame, you can enter and leave the zone as many times as you want, and you'll only need to pay the charge once. However, if you drive in at say 10 PM, leave at 3 AM, you've crossed that midnight threshold, you would be subject to 2 charges. You'll be able to make a payment using the government's payment system, which is available online and over the phone. And you must pay 6 days before the day you go in, the day you go in, or 6 days after. That is a 13-day payment window. If you do not pay within that time frame, you'll be subject to a fixed penalty notice of £120. That's reduced to £60 if paid within 14 days. There are cameras inside the zone, ANPR cameras that will pick you up. But there will be no notification that you receive to let you know that you've entered the zone. The onus will be on you as a driver to know that you've entered, and it's on you as a driver to make the payment within that time frame. We have over 300 signs being installed on the boundary and approach to the Clean Air Zone warning you that you're entering, but you will not receive a letter or a text or anything like that. So you need to be aware of where you're going and if your car is going to be subject to the charges, and if so, make the payment within that time frame. So the big question is, what is a compliant vehicle? Will I be charged, etc.? So the easiest thing to do is to visit the Brumbury's website, where there is a link to the government vehicle checker. From there, you can enter your registration detail and it will tell you whether or not you're subject to charges. The emission standards that we're looking to meet are a Euro 4 petrol standard or better and a Euro 6 diesel standard or better. This information is in your V5C logbook. You also will not be charged if you have a gas Euro 6, fully electric, fully hydrogen, or hybrid electric meeting those Euro 4 or Euro 6 standards. So if your vehicle meets any of those emission standards on screen, you will not be charged. You do not need to take any action. To put it into context, most Euro 4 vehicles came into circulation, most Euro 4 petrol vehicles came into circulation from about 2006 onwards. And most Euro 6 diesel came into manufacture from about September 2015 onwards. It's important to stress that those dates are a guidance. It is the emission standard that we are looking for you to achieve. So despite some media reports and myths, etc., the Clean Air Zone is not intended to be a money-making scheme for the council. If we make zero money from this project, then that's great, because it means we've achieved our objective of improving air quality levels in the city centre by deterring high polluting vehicles. However, we do know that in the early days especially, we will make some money from this. So we are legally bound that the money has to be reinvested in transport related projects and policies. It cannot be used to support the council's general budget and day-to-day services such as bin collections, etc. So some of the schemes that have been identified where the money will be spent is implementing controlled parking zones on the boundary of the clean air zone to protect residents, to stop people parking their cars on the outside and walking in. We are funding a hydrogen bus pilot scheme that will come into effect later this year. And we're also going to be delivering a number of city centre pedestrianisation improvements and cycle lanes, etc., so that walking and cycling become more attractive, more accessible and safer to do so that you're not competing alongside cars, etc. And that in particular will help to tackle those journeys that I mentioned earlier that offer less than 1 mile. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Peter, and he will now talk through some of the support that's available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gemma. Yeah, my name is Peter Edwards, Principal Clean Air Zone Officer, working within the Clean Air Zone team. What we're going to do now, we've talked about kind of why we need a clean air zone, how the clean air zone will work. We're going to talk about some of this kind of supporting measures that are available for some of the key people. I think it's important before we talk about these exemptions and financial incentives to kind of describe where they came from. So in 2018, a consultation took place that was not a consultation as to whether we should or should not do a clean air zone. It was more, well, it was to determine how it should operate and particularly who should receive the most support, who might be most vulnerable to the impacts of a clean air zone, because we know this is a new and potentially problematic scheme for some people. Off the back of that, there was 11,000 odd responses, the busiest consultation Birmingham City Council has ever run. And off the back of that, we came up with a suite of exemptions and financial incentives to help those key groups adapt to the changes for when the clean air zone comes in. So you can see on screen the main exemptions. These are the ones that we think will cover, will be the biggest in volume and in number. So people that live within the clean air zone can apply for an exemption for their non-compliant vehicle. Obviously, if your vehicle is compliant, you do not need to apply for anything. For their non-compliant vehicle for up to 2 years. It's important to note that all of these exemptions are available to apply for online on the Brumbraes website now. So residents can have up to 2 years. You just simply need to prove that you are the registered keeper of a non-compliant vehicle and that you of course live in the zone. So a council tax bill, bank statement, that sort of thing, and your vehicle logbook, the V5C. That's the simplest one. People that work in the clean air zone and earn less than £30,000 a year and work for more than 18 hours a week in the zone. So if you only worked 1 shift a week in the zone, you wouldn't be eligible for the exemption. Can have up to a 1-year exemption from clean air zone charging. These exemptions, it's important to note, they run from the 1st of June 2021 until the 31st of May 2022. So it doesn't start from a 12-month period from when you apply for it or when we grant it. So if you apply after the 1st of June, you won't get 12 months, you'll get however much is left of that year. So it's really important that if you think you, friends, family, colleagues might be eligible, that they apply now. It's also really important to stress that this isn't an automated process. You might be eligible, but you have to prove it and you have to tell us. And then once we've approved you, we will put you on something that we're calling a white list, whereby your vehicle registration will be added to a list. The cameras will pick you up. They will initially say, well, that's a non-compliant vehicle that requires a charge, and then they will check against this list that me and my team are putting together, and that will be waived because you have an exempt vehicle. So that's residents and workers. They're the kind of 2 biggest groups that were identified. We also have commercial vehicles, so there are exemptions available for businesses that run fleets and are based within the clean air zone. And finally, visitors to medical centres and the children's hospital within the zone. So there's 3 centres that offer out of hours or emergency services. So it's not every GP practice or whatever that's located in the zone. It's only services that are out of hours or emergency, and that exemption will be administered via kind of a voucher scheme. So you'll go to the children's hospital. If you've got a non-compliant vehicle, you'll be able to access a voucher which you then credit online and will give you no charge for that day. So that's how that will work, and that will be launched obviously obviously when the zone goes live. Next slide, please, Gemma. So in addition to all of these exemptions that are kind of available to apply online and the ones that we think we're going to get the biggest numbers for, there are also a number of kind of national exemptions that are kind of determined by the vehicle's status or the vehicle's being a special vehicle in some regard. So it's important firstly to note that vehicles with a blue badge will not or are not exempt from Clean Air Zone charging. However, if the vehicle has a disabled passenger tax classification, so this is something that's listed on your V5C, this is a DVLA classification, then that will grant you an automatic national exemption from charging in all clean air zones. So if you're in receipt of certain disability benefits, and there's information about this on our website, you may be eligible for this vehicle classification, or you may already have that vehicle classification, so it's worth checking your V5C. And please do kind of spread that message to anyone who might be concerned about that. But it's important to say that there is not an exemption for blue badge holders. Motorcycles will not be charged, and then you've got your more specialist vehicles, so showman's vehicles used for events and fairs and circuses, that sort of things. Cranes, JCBs, emergency services vehicles, they will be exempt because obviously they're quite difficult to upgrade and they're very specialist. Historic vehicles, so vehicles over 40 years of age, will have an automatic exemption as well, because that's listed on the V5. That's a DVLA classification. And then finally, community and school transport. So those are your ring and ride, your not-for-profit transport. So they will also be able to access an exemption, and that one is applicable online. So if you're part of any community groups or anything like that and operating minibuses or anything on a not-for-profit basis and have a section 19 or 22 for those vehicles, then they will be eligible. Again, all the information, the detail on those exemptions is on the website. Next slide, please, Gemma. Thank you. So we've talked about the exemptions, and the exemptions are there I described to give people some breathing space. So it enables you to have a year, or if you're a resident, up to 2 years where you don't pay the charge. You still have the non-compliant vehicle. So ultimately we want that non-compliant vehicle to be either replaced with a compliant vehicle, a cleaner, less polluting vehicle, or not driven into the zone and converted to walking, cycling, using public transport. In order to do this, we've secured a pot of funding from central government. The most relevant one, well, this is the overview, isn't it? So this is the broadest one. So I'll go through them all in a fair bit of detail. But the one that most people are interested in is our scrappage scheme. This is for people that work in the zone. So the same kind of terms and conditions that I described for the workers exemption. So if you work in the clean air zone and you qualify for the exemption, you can have that time to be exempt, but you can also come to us in the coming months and have that vehicle scrapped, and in return for scrapping that non-compliant vehicle, you'll have two options. So you can either have £2,000 towards the price of off the price of a new compliant vehicle, or you can have a mobility credit, so you can have £2,000 put onto a Swift card to be used on the public transport network within the West Midlands. So that scheme is not live yet. We will be hopefully making an announcement about that scheme in the next week or two. You can express your interest for that scheme on our website, but the advice is, if you're going to be eligible for the scrappage scheme, you need to be eligible for the exemption. So apply for your exemption, express your interest for the financial incentive, and as soon as that is open for applications, we will be emailing everyone, and hopefully be emailing everyone within a week or two to an announcement with who kind of our scrappage partner is and a bit more detail on how the scheme's going to work. There's also then a £10 million pot of money to support SMEs, so small medium enterprises in the West Midlands who operate HGVs and coaches. So it's not just Birmingham based, not just based in the CAZ, in the Clean Air Zone, but people who operate HGV fleets. That fund is available to apply for now. And so please take a look on the website for further details on that one. And then there's another pot of money to help upgrade and replace the taxi fleet in the city, because we know obviously that taxi drivers, private hire and hackney carriage drivers, are some of the biggest, put in some of the most miles in our city. So we want them to have the cleanest vehicles possible. So there's a pot of funding to help them upgrade, and that funding is also already available. So if you know any drivers, please encourage them to apply. We've already paid out, I think, on 700 plus applications, so it gives you an idea of the impact the Clean Air Zone is already having before it's even gone live, where we've assisted the upgrade or replacement of 750 plus vehicles that are no longer those higher polluting, mostly diesel vehicles. So that's a really positive measure that's coming in ahead of the Clean Air Zone even going live. So it shows you the impact already. Next slide, please. So we've talked about we've talked exclusively about the Clean Air Zone so far, and obviously that's important, but it's also important to kind of set this into a wider context, that this isn't the only measure that Birmingham City Council is putting in place to try and clean up the city's transport network to make it cleaner, greener and more efficient. So we saw in the early slides that we're too overly reliant on private motor vehicles, and that over-reliance is leading to congestion, it's leading to air pollution, it's leading to unhealthy, to obese, high levels of obesity in this city, because people are simply not active enough. So in accompaniment to the Clean Air Zone, there's an awful lot of other things going across the city, so I think it's important to touch on those. So the Birmingham has a transport plan, and it has 4 main visions or big moves, as the slide says. So just going to run through those. The first one is to try and reallocate road space and take road space away from private motor vehicles and give it to people that are walking, cycling or using public transport. So this could take the form of bus lanes, cycle lanes, bus priority. Lots of local high streets during the COVID pandemic had some on-street parking removed in order to make it a nicer environment for people to walk on and to aid social distancing. So that sort of reallocation of road space away from the private motor vehicle and to those other groups. There's also a desire to transform the city centre, to pedestrianise more areas, to restrict through movements of private motor vehicles, which sometimes inhibits the ability of public transport. So we don't have many cross-city bus services. So at the moment, and we can put it in the chat afterwards, there is actually a consultation on cross-city bus services at the moment, and some measures to help do that. So whilst Birmingham City Council doesn't control the public transport network and the bus services, we are trying to improve access for the public transport network to make it more efficient and quicker. The next one is about prioritising active travel in local neighbourhoods. So everything we've talked about really so far has been focused on the city centre and the Clean Air Zone area. But obviously we live all across the city, and we need to be prioritising active travel where we live. All those short journeys that Gemma talked about earlier, popping to the shop for a half-a-mile journey, doing the school run, are they really necessary in a vehicle? And can we make it safer, easier and more attractive to do that by foot or by bike? So this is the introduction of things like low traffic neighbourhoods, more cycle lanes, better networks, more space for people to walk. So those schemes have started to go in already. There's a low traffic neighbourhood scheme in Kings Heath. We've got Lascelles, Bourneville, various other, Castle Vale, they've put some measures. And at the moment there is a platform called Commonplace, because of course normally anything like this, you'd do an event in a community centre, or you'd put a pop-up on your local high street. We can't do those things at the moment because of COVID. So what we have at the moment, and I would encourage you to go and take a look, is a platform called Commonplace, where all these different schemes that we've talked about, there's plans there, and you can comment on them and you can say, this isn't what, some of them are already in, you can say this isn't working, this is working well, this needs improving. Some of them are brand new, and we're seeking the input of Birmingham residents to improve those, and having recently been granted further funding from central government to improve and implement more of these measures like cycle lanes, bus lanes, etc. And then the final one is just to try and manage the demand by using parking as kind of a demand management tool. So removing all free on-street parking from the Clean Air Zone, from the city centre, So making it less convenient again to drive your private motor vehicle, and making it more kind of competitive really with the public transport and the cost of public transport, and also the fact that an awful lot of space in our city centre is given over to car parks, and actually could that space be better used? So there's a move to try and remove and improve the use of parking areas, and so those are the four main visions. I think it's just important to kind of contextualise everything that City Council is trying to do, as well as the clean air zone, to try and make this a cleaner and greener city. The final slide, please, Gemma, just kind of sets that in the even wider context of the climate emergency. The clean air zone, as we've already talked about, is an enabler of change. We've already seen 700 plus taxi drivers that have upgraded or replaced their vehicles. The impact is already being felt, but it's important to also note that Birmingham is on the route to zero carbon by 2030. We're in the midst of a climate emergency. We're also in the midst of a kind of respiratory pandemic where people are suffering from lung conditions that affect our lungs. So we need to be doing as much as possible to improve the health and well-being of our residents. But it's not just the City Council. We need the help of individuals, communities and businesses to do that. So we're working in partnership with people like National Express to introduce hydrogen buses onto the streets of Birmingham. We're working with a private supplier to put more electric vehicle charging points across the city, and we're trying to support the Hackney carriage industry with purchasing up to 50 electric Hackney carriages to kind of lease out to them, because we know that there's only one electric Hackney carriage on the market and it costs about 60,000–70,000 pounds. So we're trying to support lots of different industries and areas to make this transition to cleaner and greener modes of transport. So I think it's important just to kind of wrap up on that one, really, just to show that it's not just about the clean air zone. There's an awful lot of other stuff going on, and the ambition is to make Birmingham a cleaner, greener and more pleasant place to work, live, but also to travel. So that concludes the slides. You can see on the final slide now that there's just some contact details for us for the clean air zone. So you can see that there's our website, brumbreathes.co.uk. There's a wealth of information on there about the clean air zone, about what other companies, what other people are doing. And then if you can't find the answer that you're looking for, and hopefully you can from this presentation from the website, then you can email us, and we have a kind of a team mailbox, cleanair@birmingham.gov.uk, which we monitor on a daily basis. And as Gemma said at the start, we're recording this webinar. It will be put onto YouTube. We will share it with everyone who registered. So even if you registered but couldn't attend, you will still be able to get this. But when you receive that email, what we would really appreciate is if you share it. What we want to do as much as possible is to engage people. That has its challenges with COVID. So when you receive that email, send it to friends, family, colleagues, and they can have the same experience that you've had live. They can just check for the details that they need and visit our website. So I can't actually see any questions coming through as yet. I will just go on mute for a couple of moments and see if anything is going to come through. If no questions come through, that's absolutely fine. That hopefully means we've delivered a presentation that answered all your questions. But if you think of questions afterwards, of course, visit the website or drop us an email. But I'll just go on mute for a couple of minutes, see if anything pops up, and then otherwise we'll bring the call to a close. So thank you very much. Okay, well, there doesn't appear to be any further questions coming through, so we'll just draw the the webinar to a close. So on behalf of myself and Gemma, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to attend. I hope you found it useful. As I say, myself or Gemma will be dropping everyone who registered an email following the call, and you'll have all the information. But yeah, well, thanks once again for joining, and yeah, goodbye.